Hey guys, welcome back to the Living Set Apart podcast. I'm Tyler,
I'm Dana.
and that's my beautiful wife. And we're
I
glad
hope so, because if it's not me, we got problems.
it's the final take. We're not doing it.
Fair enough.
Oh my goodness, I'm a blessed man, y'all.
You didn't even turn your phone
I
off.
didn't put it on vibe. I can't turn it off. We got kids. Silent it goes. We're professionals here, in case y'all didn't know. Welcome back. We appreciate y'all being here, and we've got some pretty good content for you today. I do believe we're going to be talking about just the basics, honestly, of what are you building on? What's your foundation for your marriage and for child rearing? How you're raising and training your kids, your arrows. Hope you got a quiver full, or at least working towards that. Yeah. So we'll get started up. Just jump right into it with a conversation we were having earlier, and I'll let Dana speak to that.
Yeah, one of the things that in our marriage early on, we kept, I don't know, it felt like we were like these battering rams going at each other. And we couldn't figure out what was going on until we realized that, well, for instance, and Tyler has his own version of this story. So I'll do the short version of mine, and then we can elaborate as we go into what we're talking about today. But we're essentially talking about one of the foundational things in marriage is trust, and how couples can build that trust in just very simple, everyday things. Because I think on the woman's side, we're kind of always feeling like we're these little like lightning rods, kind of with our little antennas out. Like, is does he hear me? And does it matter to him? And is he going to do what he says he's going to do? I'm not saying that it's across the board for every wife out there, so hear my heart. But for a lot of us, that's kind of where we're at. And so if we're going to, we're talking about not just like doing life with somebody else, but we're talking about rearing children with somebody else. And so one of the big foundations is the trust. I'll start with the trust foundation. Tyler has it more like, his picture is more like a bowling alley with the little, what do you call those guys that you put up for the kids?
So the gutter guards?
The gutter guards.
Yeah.
Like if you had gutter guards on your marriage, this is how Tyler describes them.
Well, it's more like guardrails on a highway.
Oh, I'm sorry. Guardrails on a highway. That's
Yeah.
much better than gutter rails at the bowling
It's all
alley.
right, though. It's all right. Bowling's fun. It's okay.
It is. Fair enough.
Yeah. It's because of the gauge analogy with you guys are our gauge with how we're doing as a husband.
And how is that actually biblical? That a wife is the husband's gauge.
Well, it's not necessarily in there as a scripture verse. You know, I can't give you an address to drive you to that necessary or that specific verse necessarily. But as far as in principle, yeah, it's definitely there. I'd probably point you over to Peter for the principle. Live with your wives in understanding ways so that your prayers won't be hindered. I don't know about you fellas, but I need my prayers to not be hindered, right? I'm the head of my household as far as the spiritual head. Jesus is the authority, right? But under that, I've been charged with being responsible for my wife and our children. We're definitely 100% co-laborers. You know, I'm not more important than her. She's not more important than me. We have equal importance as far as in the eyes of God, but as far as responsibility, that's on my shoulders. So with that being said, it's extremely important that my prayers are not hindered. So I need to live with Dana in an understanding way and be very well versed and sensitive to how she operates, right? Like how she maneuvers through life, you know, through her various relationships, not just with me, but with our children, with the ones that we still have under our roof, the ones who are older, who have families of their own, her friends, right? Like, who are members of the body of Christ, who are in the family of God and who are outside of the family of God, right? So inside all those various dynamics of relationships and situations and whatever life brings at her, it impacts her heart, her emotions to one degree or another. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it jars her by any means at all, but, make no mistake, our interactions do have an impact on us, even us guys, right?
So can we use the trash scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. Should I just kind of tie it back into the gauge thing?
Yes, I think
feel
that would be
I
really
got
good.
off track right
No.
there
But
bit.
the gauge and the guardrails, we'll just call them the GG.
Okay.
The gauge and the guardrails, because I think they go hand in hand. But just for everybody listening, so that I'm kind of a visual. So if I don't have something real practical and something that I can kind of see in my mind's eye, it's hard for me to like wrap my mind around stuff. So if you're listening to us for the first time, you're probably going to get used to Tyler is such a great teacher, and he's an intellect, and so he's super smart. And not that I'm not smart, but I do need pictures. I'm like, talk to me like I'm a kindergartner so I can get this, please. So with that in mind, having said that, so for us, one of the scenarios early on was the trash. Okay, so can we build in the guardrails and the gauge? So if wives are the gauge, think of them like a gauge. How do you describe it? Like, what do you call it? Like, what do you call it? The instrument panel on the car?
Like your instrument panel, your gauge clusters on your dash. And I don't know about an intellect. I might be an intellect on a caveman kind of level, but I appreciate
so
that.
Smart.
That was so sweet of you to say that. But just your instrument panel in your car, your truck.
Okay, so wives' instrument panel.
Right. So if you're going down the road and if you're a good driver and you're responsible and you're paying attention to your gauges
and your guardrails
and your guardrails.
There's your guardrails. Your guardrails are what?
Hang on a second.
Okay.
Back to the gauges.
Okay.
So men, if you're going down the road and you pay attention to your gauges are going wacky, you would be wise to pull over, pop the hood, see what's going on, right? Hopefully you don't have any smoke coming from anywhere. But yeah, that's not the time that you want to be doing preventative maintenance. That's like you've run that thing to failure, right? If you're pulled over on the side of the road and you got to pop the hood, that's not a good situation. You want to be doing some preventative maintenance. You want to be taking care of your vehicle, no different than your marriage and in your wife, in that practical sense of doing things for your wife and trying to live with her with an understanding way. So if she's giving you emotional signals and her gauges are going off as to how you are being a husband on the kind of job that you're doing, these are going to look like what?
Well, for instance, back to the trash can thing. So when we first, can we do that? Can we use that as the example? Okay. Absolutely. So when we first got married, I know it seems so small, but it was never really about the trash. So we were establishing some areas of just trust, to be honest. I came with a lot of trust issues. We won't go into all that now. That's a whole other episode. But I came into the marriage with a lot of trust issues. And so I would look for little things through the day that were like, Tyler said this is what he's going to do. And then Tyler did it. And little did I know that I was like this little trust deposit. It was like every time that he said he was going to do something and he did it, it was like he deposited trust inside. And it was healing, honestly. It did healing to me. And there was a lot of healing that he had done in. But then we got to this point where it was like, I would be like, hey, we would just be like cleaning up dinner and be like, hey, do you mind taking the trash out? And he'd be like, yeah. And then, I'm going about my business and not thinking the worst of him by any means, but equally at, toward the end, getting a little bit apprehensive, like, is he going to still do it? Did he forget? Do I need to help him and just remind him? Or if I remind him, is that going to be nagging at him? It was like all these things would go inside of my mind, and all I was really so that would be like my gauges popping off. Yeah. Well, those are, I feel like we have internal things that you guys don't see yet. The gauges popping off is usually when I'm at the sink and I realize he just kisses me on the cheek and he's like, I'm going to head off to bed. And I realize.
So with that, so on back to those internal gauges that you have going off, depending on your skill level as a husband, fellas, you can pick up some of those nonverbal cues, body language and things like that to determine where she's at emotionally, what she could be feeling or processing about something.
Yeah, because usually
and in this case, it's about the trash.
Because usually by the time you would ask, is something wrong? In my mind, I'm like, but anyways, that was further down the road. Like we're talking early on though.
Yeah.
So early on when it really wasn't that big of a deal and there wasn't a pattern yet.
Right.
It wasn't that big of a deal. It was just like, hey, can you take the trash out? Yeah. Oh, hey, before you go to bed, remember you said you're going to take the trash out. It was those kind of things. But then like as months turned into like a year and a year turned into 2 years and we were still doing that same thing, what happened is it started to slowly whittle at our trust that when he said he was going to do something, could I really trust it? Whether it was taking the trash out, putting oil in the car, other things.
Yeah, whatever.
I can't think of it now, but at the time they were big.
Just based on the one seemingly simple task of taking out the trash.
Mm-hmm.
And well, it is I said seemingly simple. It is a simple task, but it's not a simple thing to give your word to your wife, regardless of how small the task may be. Your word is a big thing to your wife, right? And not follow through with that, not do what in that case, what I said I was going to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't honor my word to you. Broken trust over the course of,
Yeah. So in the beginning, it wasn't like if we're going back to the dashboard analogy or the instrument panel analogy on the car, it wasn't like all the lights were lit up. It was just maybe like, you got a low air in your tire light, like, something that's pretty, what would you call it? Minuscule. Minor. Yeah. Or minor. Yeah. It wasn't a big deal.
Needs to be addressed, but you can. Yeah.
Right. But you don't put air in that tire and you don't address that tire after time and you just let it go and let it go and let it go. Before you know it, you've got a blown tire.
Yep.
And then if you still don't address that, then you're riding on a rim and you're just, and so you just get that escalation. And so what had happened in the early years was that that was where we were. It was like whether it was the trash and then the trash had evolved into something else and then something else. And pretty soon we were having these massive like blowouts over things that seemed so small, but what the Lord was the Lord was doing was using those things, those little tiny everyday things to start highlighting the areas that he wanted to see us have victory in, which was, sorry. Sorry. What you can't see is that one of our children have just decided that they needed our attention. So they're slipping notes underneath the door. It's so cute. But anyways, God had really, because we wouldn't, like anything else, if things aren't working right and they finally get broken down, like they start getting attention that they maybe normally wouldn't have got. And so we had to really understand that, like, hey, God is highlighting this thing that it's, and we used to say, so now it's kind of a funny thing we say between us now, it's not about the trash.
Right.
No matter what we're talking about, if it's something that seems small that we keep not being able to, we're going around that mountain again and again. We say that we're like, it's not about the trash. There's something else that's going on that God is allowing to use that thing, as small as it is, to help grow us. Yeah. Okay. So we got the note from under the door. If you're dying to know what it was, we have a missing cat that has now come home. And so she's happy. I don't think he was missing. We have an indoor cat that decided to become, an outdoor cat. It's going out and doing what cats do. Anyways, all that to say, if you are, and I'm going to pass this back to Tyler after this, but if you are finding that you're hitting what feels like a speed bump over something like taking the trash out, and again, for women, well, let me finish that thought. If you're hitting that speed bump and you're feeling like you're not getting any progression, but it's making you you're finding resentment or you're finding anger as a wife. These are things that really the Lord may be highlighting these things inside of your marriage. And some of the things that you may get kickback on, like early on before we kind of figured out that God was trying to grow us up a little bit and trying to teach us some things about his word and how to walk that out. We got a lot of terms like, why are you riding me? Or why are you asking me again? Or you already told me that.
I said I was going to do it.
Yeah. I remember that. I said I was going to do it. I didn't know I was on a time frame. So there's all these little, and
Mr. Sensitive.
but and then there's all these little, those are those little cues though, and so in time, as I finally realized that, it was okay to help him. It's okay to say, hey, you said you were going to take the trash out. Can you just help me? And I would say these words, can you help build some trust with me and let me know when you were planning on doing that so that I have a right expectation? Because otherwise I'm just left hanging out there. Like, is he going to do it tonight? Is he going to do it in the morning before he goes to work? Like, do I have to wake up and smell trash? Or do I have to, whatever. It was really not about the trash. It was just, when is he going to do what he said he was going to do? And handling that on our guardrails, which is to honor our husbands and to talk to them and to treat them and to love them as we do Christ. The hard thing for us, though, I think sometimes as women is trying to picture Jesus not taking the trash out.
Well, sure.
You're like, but again, it's regardless. It's not talk to your husband in an honoring and respectable manner when he's doing everything right. It's do it anyways. Yes. So that took some time.
And that's the challenge, right? Over in Ephesians, we're both sexes, both husband and wives are both challenged and commanded to do the near impossible thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You ladies are charged with respecting us and submitting to us when we are, super Christian, Christ-like husband, doing all the things, and when we're complete fools, even sometimes, right? The furthest thing from a Christ-like husband.
But really, just
not easy to do.
But you said near impossible, and it feels like that sometimes.
It does, and it's equally for husbands who are like men. As well as anybody, because you're married to me, how selfish men, or at least your husband, can be. It's not an easy job being married to me sometimes. It's over the years, right? We've covered some ground. Haven't been married as long as some, been married longer than others. I like to think that we got kind of like a, what do you call that? A multiplication factor.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it's hard to, for men as equally to be selfless, without Christ. It's pretty near impossible, to love somebody else the way that we would love and care for ourselves.
And really that, one of our life scriptures for our marriage anyway is Philippians 4:13 for that very reason, is that all things are possible through Christ who gives us strength. And we say that verse, you hear it in church and you hear it on little coffee cups and everything, but at the end of the day, it really is, we need him. At the end of the day, without Jesus, none of us are going to get this right. So having said that, can we do some bullet points, just to simplify it? Going back to the trash analogy, the minute that, where were you able to turn the corner when you realized this isn't about the trash, this is about my word? And what was it that you and the Lord were able to come to help you turn that corner between just saying, you know what, I'll get it when I get it. Don't worry about it. You worry about you. I'll worry about me. The trash is my chore. At what point were you able to just turn that corner and be like, you know what, this is an area where I can live with my wife in an understanding way. And this is an area for her to learn to honor and respect me, even when she's not getting what she wants in a way that she wants it. Yeah,
for me, I can't necessarily remember or attach it to a specific instance or time. But I do remember a verse that he highlighted to me, that it's one that you and I both know well, that he's used for years to get my attention and to keep me kind of on track. And it's just Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church. He gave himself up for her, you know? So, and for me, on a practical kind of boots on the ground, everyday living kind of way, is just, it's not about what Tyler wants to do in the moment, or what maybe my desires and my priorities are at that time. If it's something that is important to you in that moment, then it needs to be important to me, right? Because that's sacrificing and laying down myself for whatever little trivial thing that I have going on, from some maybe a hobby interest or some other task that I wanted to do, or maybe it wasn't even to do anything. Maybe I just wanted to sit in the recliner and scroll or whatever, you know, something mindless like that. But you needed to be the priority. I needed to lay down my life and prefer you. So.
No, that's good. You know, and on the wife's side, I think it's really important that we keep getting letters under the door. I think that it's really important that, you know, if there are things that you feel like, you know, one of the things in our marriage that we were able to come to an agreement with was that this was like a no nagging zone. And it didn't mean that I wasn't going to nag. It just meant that it wasn't going to be considered as nagging. It was going to be looked at like, if a kid has, let's just look at your kids, if you have kids or whatever, or even the wife thing, back to the wife thing. If a wife comes and says, can you take out the trash? Can you take out the trash? Can you take out the trash? The fact of that it's having to be repeated, not necessarily like anybody wants to hear the dripping faucet. We get that scripture, okay? Because to do that just to do it is wrong. I'm not saying that. But there is a concept too, you know, and a principle that if it was having to be repeated over and over again, then, you know, then there's a breakdown in communication, or there's just a breakdown in, you know, if I have to come to Tyler 4 times in one night about the trash, clearly I'm not trusting that he's going to do what he says he's going to do, because I feel the need to have to keep coming up behind him. Having said that, on the flip side of it, I've learned through the years also that I am not the voice of the Holy Spirit inside of Tyler. Tyler has a Holy Spirit that he can hear inside of him. And so I've learned that it's okay to say, hey, to remind him with, you know, I mean, everybody needs a reminder from here and there. But as a wife I would watch for patterns forming, not because I wanted to be like, hey, look at you, you're breaking our trust down again. But it was, hey, I love you. I love us. And I'm here to help, because if we get off into that little ditch again, that took us a while to get out of there, you know? And so I'm not reminding you for the sake of pointing out that you haven't done something right. I'm reminding you because this is a principle of trust, and it's our foundation. I don't want to scrape at our foundation and weaken our foundation. So if I see it, I'm saying it for the sake of, hey, I'm going to help you. And so helping usually sounds different than nagging.
Yeah, and to that, I think it's important that husbands see their wives in the proper light. So can you talk about the difference between being viewed as a wife who is a nag versus a wife who is a true help to her husband?
Yeah, I think it's a posture of our heart, for starters. If we're finding that we're really resentful, there's an area that's going to have to get healed up and shored up with the Lord. And that isn't, it kind of comes, if you find out that you've been running into, if you're the wife that's been feeling like you've needed to nag, then there's clearly, I would say there's some trust that's been broken. And so rather than going after the thing that you just want them to do, it's going to need to be brought to the Lord. Like, Lord, I recognize that some of our foundation of trust has been broken. can you please help my husband? And at that point, what you're doing then is you're following suit. You're honoring your husband. You're not, sometimes the nagging just has to stop, and you just have to get on your knees and you need to just pray, and you need to intercede for your man because he needs the help. And at the end of the day, we got to look too and make sure that we're not, yanking out, the little tiny speck in their eye when we've got stuff in ourselves. Like there were times where I would really have to get before the Lord. And before I could even utter a thing about Tyler, I could feel just his presence, just like almost like longing for me to just look at myself and do an inquiry of my own heart. Like, Dana, have you ever forgotten something? Are you being merciful? Are you showing compassion to him? Has he had an 18-hour day today where he actually forgot to take the trash out? Did he have an 18-hour day yesterday and he forgot 2 days in a row? And the pattern isn't malicious. The pattern is your husband's just dog tired and he needs some help. And that may just be quietly take the trash out. And this isn't him breaking your trust bridge down. This is just he missed one. And so to me, the pattern is, to me, the difference is a wife who is looking for her husband to mess up is not in the right place. Yeah. A wife who is looking to see if he is keeping his word. And then if he doesn't, saying, hey, husband, I just want you to know that XYZ for a few days now hasn't been done. And I know that you're a man of your word. But when you say that you're going to do something and you don't do it, it really does start to tear down how I look at you and how our trust is being either built or destroyed, whether you're depositing trust or you're withdrawing trust. And that to me is a way that you can really come at your husbands with honor and respect. And even if they don't hear you, worst case scenario, you have the guy that's like, mind yourself or whatever. I don't know. I would like to think there aren't Christian men out there that say that, but I don't know. We all have bad days.
Surprised.
We have bad days. But even in the worst case scenario, and they don't respond to you in a Christ-like way, you can still take that before the Lord too and say, God, you know what? I still want to honor my husband. I want to do what's right in your sight, because it's not, I want to do what's right in your sight only when he's treating me good. Yeah. That's not what it says in the book. Right. It doesn't say that.
It's easy to do that, right?
It is easy to be nice to people who are doing everything you want, yeah. But when they're not, it's God, I'm going to honor you, because it's love the Lord your God first. Mm-hmm. Not your husband. Your husband isn't your God. So you love God first, and you do whatever it is that God says for you to do, because to love him is to obey him. And then it starts to trickle down.
And it's even to respect and submit as you're doing it.
Yes.
Unto the Lord.
Yes.
Even when we're knuckleheads.
Yes.
Right? So,
but the beauty is when you do have a man whose quest is to be Christ-like, and you're working in tandem, it's beautiful. Because then when the wife does go and say, husband, hey, I know you've been tired. I've seen some things, but I've asked you to do a few things over here, whether it be with the kids or the house or whatever. And I'm starting to feel like you're withdrawing more trust than we're depositing these days. And it's starting to make me concerned. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, when you have a Christ-like man, he's going to be like, wow, thank you for communicating and letting me know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So good. That's awesome. And men, excuse me, I would encourage you, if you're not already, to be intentional about how you're listening to your wives. If you've missed it a few times and she's hurt and maybe she's not talking to you in the best way, she's coming from a place of hurt, maybe even frustration or anger, and just has you on blast, or just being, kind of low key about it, whatever the case may be. Still key in and listen to what it is that what she's saying, not how she's saying it.
Yeah.
And that's a huge ask. Like I don't think if women could really grasp how big of an ask that is for men early on, that would be huge. But nonetheless, that's your lady, that's your wife, that's your God-given gift of a bride. And you should look at her as such, right? So acknowledge that you've missed the mark. She's in the condition she's in because you have missed some things. She's at where she's at because you've missed, for whatever reason, the gauges that she has kind of fired off at you. Her lights have been lighting up. You've missed it, whether you had the tools and ignored it, or maybe you didn't have the tools. Maybe you didn't come into this thing equipped, and that's all right too. Like we all got to start from somewhere. So, but at the end of the day, it's important to accept responsibility for your own actions and for your own mistakes. So, and the condition of your wife, the condition of your wife's heart, her emotional state, by and large, I'm a firm believer that is something that is completely on us as husbands. I believe and have seen wives from various marriages be healed of physical ailments just after their husband began to love them like Christ. I mean, it's amazing. It's supernatural. Like
I mean, maybe not physically, but like we'll do an episode on it too. But like when we got married, like some of the attributes that Tyler really exemplified, at the same attributes, of the Lord, were healing. And so I guess just wanted to do a little plug of that we'll go into we'll do it on another episode, but like just to, yes, head nod at that. Yes. High five. And if there are husbands that are listening, do not underestimate just, when it says that the Lord is kind, your kindness to your wife, when it says that he's full of compassion, he's slow to anger, your ability to be patient with her and not get angry or whatever, all of those things, like if anger can hurt her, well, then of course your patience can help her and heal her. And it's beautiful, and it just goes to show like how perfect God is and how he made the marriage union so perfect, because they really do go hand in hand together. But anyways, I really just wanted to say yes. Yeah, it's really good. But could I give just a real quick story to what you were just saying about sometimes just to be listening in on, so there was a point when, like, again, early years, I feel like those first 5 years were like, whoa. But anyways, okay. So my husband had a work truck, and on his work truck, he had a schedule for when his oil needed to be changed. Excuse me. And like clockwork, he would get that oil changed for the company truck. So then we had a personal vehicle that I drove around with the kids in. And it wasn't that I wasn't capable of going and get our oil checked or changed, excuse me. But, I feel like that just like threw me under the bus right there. I didn't even say oil change. I said oil check. Okay. But
I'm sure they know what you mean.
Yeah. But anyway, so I could have gotten the oil changed if I needed to. But that was an area in our life that Tyler had decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to handle this for you. And what had happened was I would sit back and just trying to be, again, good wifey, super patient, thinking the best of the hubs. And I'd watch him get his work truck oil changed like clockwork. And then ours would be like the light would be on. Or I would put something on the calendar, can you change the oil on Saturday? Or I would mention it and it would just go by. And so I think I just want to
Husband fell right there.
I just want to give a perspective on the inner workings of wives. Not all of them, not pigeonholing wives out there. I'm just, wanting to do an inner perspective. So he's looking at it like when I approached him about it, I said, hey, like you had said that you were going to do this on the car. And he's like, well, yeah, but like, this is, our bread and butter. Like I needed to handle this one first and I'll get to the other one. And although that was true, like I do think there was some priority there that was really good. But what he didn't know was, and this is where he really didn't know. Like it wasn't that I was imagining he didn't know. Like he really didn't understand it, because this is where I feel like as women, we can come up in our communication with our husbands, was that I felt like I was less than like I, as a wife, was feeling less than, like, well, I'm not as important as his work. Because if I was and the kids were as important as his work, then surely he would have done our oil change first. And in his logic mind, he's thinking, no, I go to work in this thing and I drive hundreds and hundreds of miles in this thing. And so I need to make sure that we get this because you're driving less than 10,000 miles a year in ours, going pretty much 25 miles an hour where we live in a little tiny town. And he's driving like crazy in this thing. And so in his mind, he's logically thinking, I'm just, this thing is like needing it way more than this one's needing it. And this one can take a break for just a second. But I had computed that as not being as important as the work truck. And that couldn't have been further from the truth. So I want to just give kind of a heads up to wives out there that when, one of the best things I heard, and I wish I had a scripture for it, I don't, but it stuck with me. I feel like I'm not saying this is a thus saith the Lord, but I do believe that it's important. But it says that resentment is like believing what the enemy is saying about your husband. So it was almost like that thought had come in like, well, if I was really important to Tyler, he would have totally changed our oil first. But that's a lie. Like I am important to him. Yeah. To think that he would not take care of the vehicle that we ride around in could not have been further than the truth. But as a wife, I need to communicate when you put our vehicle off too long, it makes me feel. Now, feelings can be validated, doesn't necessarily mean that they're true. It just makes me feel like we're not important or our vehicle isn't as important as your work vehicle. And I think that, that, and honestly, like Ty, like we were good after that. Like he was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't even think you were thinking like that because they're not emotional. Men are logical. And so, just encourage if there's husbands listening and the wives are getting this, like, don't shoot them down when they come to you, because a lot of times I would go to Tyler and be like, I feel like this. And he's like, well, that's not, but I remember that day like distinctively when he was like, oh, I had no idea. Like, no, it's just, I was just trying to get this one done because I put so many miles on this, but like, absolutely, I'll come up on the other one. So that was one of those things where I felt like you were saying like, just to be listening and like reading in on some of those things. And when we do come and are vulnerable, that, it's not like poo-pooing us away. Like, oh, you're just being this emotional, sensitive,
No, definitely not. I mean, that would be a good opportunity to definitely to validate what you're saying as far as the concerns that you're bringing up, and obviously if it's something that's completely not true like that, obviously I don't think less of you than my work truck and the kids and stuff like that.
Because that statement like that will throw pretty much anybody into a defense. Like it can,
yeah.
Like you care about your job more than you. It's like what?
Yeah. No, that's not true at all. But we need to be mindful. It's important that husbands are mindful of some of the messages that we can inadvertently be sending. Our wives and our family.
But when you were saying like sometimes you have to read into that, like there are times where you're not just listening to the words, you're listening to my heart.
That's right.
And I remember that time because it wasn't a fight. It wasn't like you had taken some huge defensive posture. You were just like, wow, this is how she feels. Like, what do I need to do? You know what I mean? Yeah. And it was just like such a quick remedy. I just remember that. You just being like, I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to feel that way. Absolutely. I will make it more. I'll get on top of priority. Yeah. And then it was like, ta-da.
And for me, guys, I assure you that was a big win, not getting defensive, because that was something that I've had to battle for a long time. Just kind of throw myself under the bus right there.
Yeah, but we're all growing in the Lord. I mean, at the end of the day, we need him. And he's a good helper.
True story. True story. And hopefully, speaking of growing, hopefully this is something that this podcast is something that can help you grow some of the things that we touch on here going forward with the Set Apart podcast, is that whether it be in your marriage or in your family, that it can help you. It can help you grow in your marriage, help you grow in your family, and ultimately help you grow in your walk with the Lord. So bringing it back around to those guardrails, yeah, just keep it in the road, keep it between the ditches, and yeah, keep the faith.
Yeah, and maybe just to really quick is just keep an eye out for those little things that pop up in the day to day. That God is so good; He's in the details, and just He's so good about using some of those little things that seem so minuscule to us. That but He's using them. He's using them to grow us, and it's a good thing.
Yeah, if we lend ourselves to the process, He will use any and everything to grow us and to sharpen us. No doubt about that.
Yeah. And in the meantime, wives, keep loving your husbands like Jesus and submitting to them. It's good. It's good for them to. It's not the submission that the world talks about. It's the submission that says, you know what, I'm in it for the long haul, and that I love you, and I'm going to continue to trust God inside of us. And we're going to do that with honor, and we're going to do that with respect and love, ultimately,
Yeah. And fellas, be a real man. Be sacrificial. Lay down your life for your wives.
Don't be laying down those wives.
So she'll want to lay down with you.
Right.
Oh, boy.
Right.
Yeah. You guys have a good one. We appreciate y'all.
Yeah. Thanks for
All right.
listening.
God bless.